everyone. This is episode 2 of the DevTalks podcast. Today we are doing overloaded kits. Um, for overloaded kits, we will be talking about specifically League today, League of Legends, and the overloaded kits within League of Legends. PNG not working. I I muted in Discord, Hole. um, but anyways, we will be talking about that. Um, we have a special guest, a fellow designer. They are still learning design, but they are still considered a designer. They have worked on games already with me, and in the past on their own too. So we will have them joining, and we will be talking about this preferably from a designer's point of view, but obviously there will be variations as we all have our own personal opinion, but we will be also specifically looking at details of like numbers and other various ideas. Um, oh, I just moved the overlay. All right, gonna unmute on Discord and we will have our guest come in. All right, hello.
Hello,
The overlay is haunted. Yes, it is.
Spoopy.
All right. Most people that are often here at my stream know who you are, but would you like to introduce yourself, Kronos?
Hello, my name is KronosReaper.
Uh-huh. What do you do?
Yes, I am a budding game designist. Game designer. Designist. Um, and am a fellow. I am a teddy bear. Yes. Uh, am a fellow league player with Luna on our school's esports team.
Yes. All right. Um, you already know the topic, but today I'm talking about overloaded kits and just how I wanted to start. Last time we attempted to do this, which was originally supposed to be the first episode. Um, what is your definition of an overloaded kit?
An overloaded kit to me is you have one ability that achieves too many facets. Now, if it's one or two facets, like okay, this grants you life steal and is an active ability, that's fine. But it's when your ability does 18 different things and has 40 different uses.
All right. Mine is pretty much along the same lines when it's just when multiple abilities can be separated out into other abilities, creating more than one in like within that one ability. Now, that is accurate to the actual definition of overloaded kits, which I had looked up a while back now, but which is an overload kit is a champion that has multiple aspects within their kit squished together. This does not mean that the champion is inherently overpowered. A champion can have a bunch of aspects such as heal, dashes, and true damage, etc. to their kits, but still be manageable. So essentially, when it becomes unmanageable, it is then overloaded. Swiss Army ability, yes. All right.
And to be fair, the older champions don't innately have that problem as bad as the newer champions released.
Yeah. The more they do, the more they overload their champions because they're trying to fit so much in to get different characters that it becomes too much. Um, but that's them trying to create unique champions within a game that already had over 100 champions. And there's only so many ideas you can actually have. And I mean, there are even some of the older champions that can be considered overloaded. Actually, I don't know how old some of them are, but like, I'm pretty sure Evelyn and Jace have been around for some time, and they have a lot going on.
They do. You are correct. However, it's not as bad as like when Akshan's release came out.
Yeah,
All of his abilities had passives that
passives on
also
passives on
granted
passives.
you shouldn't have an ability that reads like a book.
But
So
what if we make one champion single ability have more passives than a different champion entirely?
yes, Viego, I see you. You are correct. What a wonderful day it is. So for those of you who do not know, League of Legends, each champion has 4 abilities. You have Q, W, E, and R are your abilities that can normally be pressed or upgraded in some way, shape, or form. On top of that, all champs have a passive, at least a singular passive. In total, just at a base amount, that means there's 810 abilities. This does not include the champions that abilities overcharge, change with form, so on and so forth. So at a base level, we're looking at 800 different abilities. How do you feel about that, Luke?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how many champions are in League now?
Like 160, I guess 163 coming up, but we're at 162 currently.
Yeah, and that's already 648, and that's just not even counting the fact that a lot of the kits are overloaded. Well, no, I shouldn't say a lot of, but there are at least 10 characters that I have found that could be considered overloaded. And we even had the debate of whether like Elise and Nidalee were overloaded
Right
because
where they change
transform.
forms.
Yeah. I still don't think that they're considered overloaded because you're completely removing an ability for a different ability.
Versus Jace, where
He still has
he's
it.
got he's got 4 abilities. Well, technically he's got 3 abilities, his alt that transforms, 3 additional abilities, and all of his abilities have at least a singular passive on top of his actual passive.
Yeah. And then the problem is we have underloaded champions now. Like Twisted Fate,
He desperately
who
needs
has two
rework.
passives
Oh boy! And guess what?
and three abilities.
His passives, or his actual physical passive is so underwhelming.
Yeah. And it doesn't do much for the game.
No, it
Like,
doesn't speed up the game. It doesn't actually grant you huge
I
amount of power spike. It
I
There's
do
too many things that just change that have changed over the time of when TF was built
yeah.
and now.
I do kind of wonder though how like first strike is on TF.
You do not get enough damage out.
Okay.
Even if you went full attack speed, you're talking about getting an additional 25-ish gold. per time you can proc it. That doesn't include, hey, I got hit before I could proc it.
Yeah. For the non-league players, what are the passives you're talking about? Okay. Um, so for Twisted Fate at the very least, his main passive is that's the you roll essentially a dice. It's like a 1 through 3 dice, or is it a 1 through 6?
Oh,
It's one
it's
through
not
three.
6.
Okay, so you roll a dice one through
I'll
three,
double
and
check
that's how
for
you
you,
get
but
how much. That's how much gold you get extra. Which most of the time you only get 1 extra gold every time you kill a minion.
oh, sorry, it is 1 through 6. Do
It
you
is
know
one through
how many
six.
times I've gotten a 6?
Not a lot.
Probably twice.
Uh,
Probably twice.
that's kind of lame. Exactly. Versus someone whose passive is to literally revive whoever was killed by the person that they just killed. Which is Akshan's passive, is to if your allies die to someone, that person that killed them will have a mark, and if you then kill that person, your teammates get automatically revived.
And to be fair, the way that that works um is if one person gets 4 kills, that person technically has killed your entire team except for you. If Akshan gets that kill, your entire team is then revived.
Yes.
And again, technically, this ability does not have a cooldown. It wipes all marks once you've claimed it. But if a fight's going on and one person gets a mark, and then you claim that and another person gets a mark, you can then immediately turn around and claim that.
Yeah. OP ability, a little bit. It's not exactly though. It does not win the game. It does. It's not incredibly strong because you just kill him first. Easy counter. um, but it's essentially the same idea as what Mercy's revive used to be in Overwatch.
Except you've put that on a DPS character now.
Yeah. Just kill him. Yeah. Easy peasy, just kill him. Um,
Now, what if I told you on that same ability, the active portion of that ability was to make him go stealth? The next passive on that same ability, he moves faster towards people who are marked and regenerates a certain amount of mana while he's stealth. So, what you're looking at 3 completely different passives on one ability. What if I told you it was actually 4? Because if he kills somebody with a mark, he gains an additional 25 gold. Now look back at the passive for Twisted Fate. Oh, goody gumdrops, I roll a die and get a 1 for killing a minion.
yeah. It's
Mana is the resource that it takes to cast most abilities.
what is mana and what is it used for? I mean, mana is relatively the same throughout most video games. It is your what limits your amount you can use an ability or an attack or I'm trying to think of another example, but um it's essentially what limits you, which not every character actually has mana in League of Legends. Which I don't know if we actually cover any of those champions in the overloaded kits. I don't think there's many
The
of
only one
those.
The only one that does is Aatrox, and
I
I
wouldn't
do not
necessarily.
believe that's an overloaded kit.
The only thing that you can maybe debate is overloaded is his Q, and even still, that's just saying three different attacks, like different type of attacks.
Correct. You get to cast it 3 times before it goes on cooldown.
Yeah,
That's not overloaded.
no,
Otherwise, Riven would also be on here.
yeah. The roll should be a multiplier, exactly. But if then it's a multiplier, then it has to have some form of cooldown because each minion is different amount of gold. Uh,
1421 and
okay, thank you.
50 something. Yep.
um,
Starting out.
yeah. So then 14 times like 6 would be an insane amount to actually get. So they would also have to lower what the dice would be and probably max it at like it would be a 1 through 3 if it's a multiplier. Yeah. There would be a lot more balancing to it, but that would greatly improve.
And that would bring him back because this past meta was all about trying to speed up your gameplay. How fast can you get to your power spikes? Meaning, how fast can I buy my items and go kill everybody else?
Yeah. And I mean it's still kind of that way at least in this current season of we're in season
12.
12. Okay.
Yep.
I couldn't remember if it was 11 or 12.
We're in 12.
Only way you can see that passive being more yeah. Right now Akshan's passive is or not Akshan. Twisted Fate's passive is not worth it. He is an underloaded champion, and we'll probably be making a lot of comparisons to
So,
that.
since we're talking about him a lot, we should probably get into the nitty gritty. Akshan is one of the ones I labeled first as having an overloaded kit. Just from top to bottom, he has too much going on for him.
Yeah, he.
Agree to disagree.
I agree. He has a lot in his kit. A lot, a lot.
So let's start from the beginning. His actual passive, every 3 hits, or every time he deals damage, essentially 3 times in a row to the same target, he gets a shield. If he only attacks twice, he gets a speed boost. That's not horrible.
It's
Like, it's kind of wordy. It's still not like the worst.
it's interesting that they're giving not just attack speed though, but also movement speed
Movement speed and a shield.
and
To
a
be
shield.
fair,
Yeah,
it's not a huge shield. I think even with um revitalize, it's only like 100 points. It's not like that shield is going to stop a whole ability, but when it's early game, it will. Now, his first actual ability is a boomerang he throws out that the more the more entities it hits, and I say entities because it does not have to just be champions, nor does it have to actually just be minions. You also have pets, turrets, and what was the other? Epics. Epic
epics
monsters.
and probably jungle camps
That
at that point
will
too.
mhm, that will extend the range of the Q by a certain amount. And then it comes back. That's still not that bad when we're talking about
No,
kit.
because that's kind of like Nico's stun,
Yep.
which
And
Nico's stun
I
is
don't consider
another. the more people Nico's stun hits, the farther it goes. But it does also
Uh,
cap at a certain amount, if I remember correctly.
it does. It has a hard cap after like the third or fourth that it hits. It will not go further or stun longer. Now for the actual overloaded part of his kit, which is the one that we've been talking about the most, which is his W, going rogue. This is that ability that we've been talking about that has so many different uses. The active is an invis. As long as you're near terrain, you can remain invisible for uh as long as you feel like. Again, as long as you're near terrain, meaning walls and so on. If if he senses a mark, that means somebody got killed. You then have a scoundrel mark, and he moves faster. He gains additional mana regen, and pretty much knows where they're going to be. Because even if they go into the jungle,
Which the jungle
he
is
can
covered
track
by,
that.
which for the non-league players, jungle is covered by a thing called fog of war, which is it causes, if there is no vision in the fog of war, you cannot see the enemy in the fog of war. You cannot see anything in the fog of war that is not your own teammate.
Correct. So on a single ability, not only is it something that can be used to locate somebody, it is your stealth. It's a movement ability. It's a gold generation ability and a mana regeneration ability. So we're talking that one ability could be spread out
It could be
across
an
his entire kit or be a whole new champion on its own.
yeah, or even at the very least, like if you wanted to say like, okay, put the mana and the gold generation part together, then okay, now you're just one ability short from an entire kit.
Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous. His next ability is a grapple that is also has an execute quality with it, unfortunately. So what that means is he will get to reuse this ability instantly if the person he hits is killed by him or by anyone else, as long as he hit them and this ability goes on cooldown, meaning it takes time for it to come back up, he instantly gets it back. Please note that this is also his second movement ability.
Third, if you count as passive.
Third, if you count his passive. His second active movement ability. How's that sound?
Better.
So, what happens is he grapples onto a piece of terrain and fires at the nearest enemy. What it doesn't tell you is if you have hit them with any ability or your auto attack, it will prioritize that target that you just hit. And you swing around while shooting at them. Okay. And to be fair, if you collide with him, meaning you stand in front of where, he's going to be swinging or anything like that, you put a wall in his way, whatever, it will stop him. But you now have two active movement abilities, one that has four different passives one that you get to essentially use anytime you make a dive with this champion, which is a lot of the time. You can dive under tower and get out of tower very quickly.
Yes.
This leads into his ultimate, which I don't really believe it's overloaded. I just believe it's kind of wordy.
It's more the rest of his kit that makes him
Yeah,
overloaded.
overloaded. It.
Yes.
Uh, which his ultimate is an ability that locks on and charges over time over the course of I think like 4 total seconds. That will deal additional damage the longer you charge it. The thing is, the way to counter that is if you stand in front of somebody, if you stand in front of any entity,
A tower,
anything stops. Yes, towers, minions, monsters,
walls.
champions. Anything that's not on his side, it goes through walls.
Oh, it
Um,
does? Okay.
it has to be a physical entity, which the towers are considered entities. Funny. Um, but yeah. So this was just one person. This is one champion. In his kit, he essentially has like 6 or 7 actual passives. That's a little nutty.
Yeah. Like, now, okay. So I guess now on the question to follow up after hearing just how much is in his kit, is he overpowered?
Is he strictly overpowered? I'd say not. He is a game changer. That revive can make a difference, especially if your whole team's down. You only have to kill one person. You're trading one life for 4.
Yeah.
That's that's worth it in my book.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that one ability
Can be split up.
can be split up into 2, maybe even 3 champions.
Yeah. He needs to be split into two. He almost needs to be split into three.
Because
Because,
between his actual physical passive and his W, it's about 5. Pardon me. It's about 5 total passives.
yeah. So the reason also I say he can be split up into three is because his W, his second ability, can already be its own champion on its own. And then his E also can almost be its own champion on its own. And then you still have two more abilities after that and a passive. So almost you can split that into three, depending on how you
I'd
want to
agree.
divide it. Now, that does make for a less interesting champion because now they do a whole lot less, but that does not mean it is necessarily wrong. Having all of that on one champion kind of makes the champion a little crazy, especially compared to any of the older champions.
Now, let's make a comparison. So, let me bring up Vel'Koz.
Of course, your main.
Yes, yes, my main. My tentacle monster. Tentacle daisies. So, he has a passive on his passive. Wow. his Q doesn't really have a passive, it's actually a second active. And what his Q does is it splits his first projectile into into a second projectile that shoots out 90 degrees in two directions. The W has no passive. It stacks his actual passive, but has no actual passive. His E has no passive. His R does have a passive. Anyone that was marked by organic disintegration, the name of his passive. Anyone that was marked by organic disintegration within the past 2.5 receives full true damage instead of magic damage. That is two passives.
Yeah. Which, depending on how much you want to actually argue this, you could say only one passive per champion, otherwise it is overloaded. But there are certain like abilities that you need that passive to make it more clear as to what actually happens. That's how I feel with Vel'Koz at the very least.
Mm, explain that a little bit further for me.
So, hold on. Let me pull up his ability so I have the actual passives in front of me.
Oh,
So, you have the main passive, which is the
organic
stacking
disintegration.
of organic destruction. Or that deconstruction. Words.
Word's hard.
Words very hard. I guess destruction also makes sense in the sentence, but um and then his other passive, where was that again?
Is technically his art. Each one you can actually
Okay.
argue stacks his passive.
Which
And if you were
okay,
looking on that website, it calls his Q a passive, even though you have to reactivate it.
it does not call it a passive, it calls it a
Is it a
recast.
recast? Okay.
Um so you have the passive normally, but then the passive that is listed on your art is just applying your actual passive.
Oh, is it really? Is
I
that the verbiage it has?
um applying three deconstruction stacks to an enemy champion marks them as researched for 7 seconds, refreshing on basic attacks and abilities. An ability hits them again against them. Words. Wow. I can't read. I should not be reading
Don't
this.
worry, I can't talk. Together, we'll make it through this.
um, but pretty much, at least the way it seems to be, is that it is taking your normal passive and applying said stacks.
So technically, he only has that
Thank you, Jinx.
singular passive.
Yes. And the only reason the passive exists on the alt is to pretty much be this is how the passive is applied. It is just a clarification. Welcome back, Colin.
Welcome back. So we went from a champ with 5/6 total passive abilities. And we just showed you a champ that has a singular passive.
And is very strong.
Very, very strong at what he does, which is make tanks go bye-bye.
Yes. He can also make squishies go bye bye, but Squishies are
Yeah,
also
but
more able to kill him first
run.
and
Or
run.
just run away. Because Vel'Koz, believe it or not, does not float or swim very fast.
No, because he is an artillery mage.
Yes. It is very immobile.
Yes, that's
Very,
that's the
very
point of
immobile.
artillery.
Yes. Artillery. Well, do you have a champion that you would like to discuss? Because I know I
So
still have a couple more on my list.
I do, and this is because this was also planned back when she was released. I have Nyla written down. Now, if I can type her name incorrectly, that would be nice.
Yo, you could type? Wow.
I know, right? Like, uh, I really cannot. There we go. I got there eventually. Um, Now, where is my document? So, with Nyla, she has essentially two sections of her first passive, and one of them is it remove the increased XP, which essentially when she is near an ally, normally when you're in a lane with someone and you're essentially sharing XP. So you only get, I think it's like half of the XP you would normally get if you were in lane solo. Nyla pretty
Uh,
much negates that.
Depends on how many champs are actually within that XP range, because even a jungler can start sapping XP if they're sitting in that bottom brush.
That is true.
So
Um,
it increases with how many people, or decreases, I guess would actually be the right terminology. You get reduced gains depending on how many champs are in that lane.
yeah. So she gains an additional 50% of the experience, which in a duo lane, that just makes up for what she was missing to begin with. Obviously, if there's more champions there soaking up XP, it's not as much. Um, so hello, Kempo. Welcome in. Welcome to the podcast. Um, which this passive only exists to put her in bot lane with a duo. That is the only reason this passive exists. At least I believe this is the only reason this passive exists. It it's a passive we see on a different champion that is a support. It is Zillion, which it's not exactly the same as Zillion's, but it functions very similarly. Zillion's it's his passive. Every time he levels up, he can level up his ally.
Not 100%. What
To
what his actual passive wording is, like, he stores XP, and whenever somebody is within range of how much XP he has stored,
yeah,
if it would
I
lead to a level up, will level them up.
I knew I was not wording that exactly correctly, but I don't have his information up right now. But
Fair.
essentially, the general
I know
idea
how that one
is
works.
yeah, just essentially the general idea is you can level up an ally. um,
Effectively, that increases how much XP is in that lane.
yes, which that's what Nyla is also doing. Now, I guess you wouldn't necessarily say this is a bad passive if it was her only passive, but it's not her only passive, and because of that, like I said, I am pretty sure this part of the passive only exists to keep her in that lane.
I agree.
Her,
I think this one was kind of tacked on there, like, we want this to be an ADC. What can we do to make her go to bot lane?
yeah, to play League wants to know some of these words. If you have any questions, just ask and we will answer them to the best of our abilities. Um, her main part of her passive, which is little strong, but with like if you changed how much some of this is, it would be fine. Maybe overpowered if it's too overtuned, but balancing helps out with that. But she she has a ability that whenever an ally gets healed or shielded, she also applies that to herself and to others. It is only a certain amount of that healing and shielding, but it still is significant enough. Um, and she will get bonus if it is like if she is full health, if I understand that correctly. Yeah, bonus shielding lasts longer as a shield that triggered the effect. Um, Now removing that shielding would be great, especially once we get into the later abilities. You will understand why I say that. Um, I probably should come back to this part of what should be removed if we are to balance her and not make her overloaded.
I mean, we can always come back.
Yeah. So if we go to her Q, which is her first ability, it
Her first
has
actual ability.
it has an active of she takes her weapon, which is a whip, and in a straight line deals physical damage that hits the enemies. It cannot hit structures, so it cannot hit like turrets, but it can hit minions and other champions, well, enemy champions,
Minions and pets and
and yeah,
yeah.
monsters and anything living. I guess is the right way to put it. Lurk, thank
Yeah.
you for the lurk. Um, she also has a passive on this Q that she gains armor penetration and causes her basic attacks to heal her for a certain amount.
So by the way, we are now up to 3 passives, and we are on her first actual ability.
Yes. Um, and technically, you could count that as two separate passives if you want to count armor pen different from the healing.
Yeah. So
Um,
we could even say we're on 4. Oh boy.
so kind of like Forget from Overwatch. Yes, but this is a damage champion.
This is a
This is
damage
an
carry champion
yes. This is an ADC.
whose whole purpose is to be squishy and deal as much damage as physically possible.
Um, and she converts this passive also converts extra healing into a shield. It's a little strong. And another part of this, I don't think that we actually it's actually worded on here. I don't know exactly where it's worded on here. But this ability also turns it so her autos do an aerial effect. It does damage to nearby enemies, which is an there is an item within League of Legends called Tiamat, which Tiamat does exactly that. It does an aerial effect with autos to enemies.
And that alone is 1200 gold.
Yes. So she has an item built into her kit. Tanky, not squishy. Yep. Yeah. She's very squishy until she starts gaining levels and items,
Until you
but
know she actually is a champion. AKA, oh my god, she just leveled up, we're all fucked.
yes. And for a lot of her early levels, she needs to stick with someone else that can heal themselves because she gets their healing. But again, why should she be getting her healing?
When she's already got additional healing from the Q. It's like, okay. I
No,
I swear I want to make a build for her because I actually have not gotten to sit down and play this champ, mostly
she
because they're not in a role that I play. But I mean, I swear, like Serix Gage would just be unnatural.
yeah. So for us is listening, yes, she gets their healing to a certain percentage and also their shielding to a certain percentage. So say you have an Aatrox next to her. Yeah, she's healing as well. Uh, that's why she's also really good with enchanters in her lane because they either heal or shield, and she gets additional healing and shielding. She
Or
also
they
gets it if
even
that
do
healing and
both.
shielding. She also gets that healing and shielding if it is applied to a person next to her and not even to her or the person themselves. Like it, Nyla has a crazy kit.
And the only reason she's not used more is because we're all bad with her at this elo.
Yes, she was extremely strong in pro play for a while there, and I think only like in Worlds have they not really played her. But between Nyla and Sivir, those were the two most played ADCs in pro play.
By the way, for those of you who do not know, pro play is considered diamond and above.
Yes.
And technically, us who are silver level players and anyone that is below us, we're not really playing League of Legends. We're
Mm.
in a game called League of Legends, but it doesn't start being League of Legends until Platinum.
Yes. And her teammates and her scale faster than enemies. Yes. Actually, I think it's just her that the XP thing is applied to. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been a minute since I've seen a
The
Nyla.
XP is just for her.
Okay, yeah. I figured, but um
The only champ that does XP for others is Zillion's passive.
okay. Um Now her second ability. We're only on the second ability. It is an active which she envelops herself in mist in which she can uh gains movement speed, reduces all magic damage, and dodges all non-turret basic attacks. Uh, all right. Interesting.
I got it. Keep going.
Thank
Keep
you.
going. I got it.
um, yeah, she dodges all non-basic attacks or non-turret basic attacks. She so pretty much if you are playing a champion that is auto attack, which is essentially anything that your auto attack is what you hit people with when you're not using an ability. She dodges all of that. You say it is and isn't broken. We have seen this ability in another champion, which is Jax. The only difference, I don't think Jax gets the movement speed or is considered ghosted, which ghosted is a spell that you can take on a champion that applies increased movement speed.
He is not considered ghosted. I don't think he gains movement speed from that.
Okay.
I will look that up
And
real
also,
fast.
the other thing is, yes, if you touch Nyla as an ally, you also can dodge these dodge basic attacks. So she not only does this for herself, where she can dodge her own basic attacks. Also, Sam, it's good. You're fine. But she can dodge. She can allow her allies to dodge your basic attacks.
So, no, he is not ghosted, but for every auto attack to an extent, or for every attack that he quote unquote dodges, which is that skill's ability, I guess, is
Uh,
the dodge ability,
okay.
uh, he gains additional damage
Okay.
by 20%, up to 100% in total. That is the verbiage. So he does not, the only thing that he can do is leap at you or dash. It's not considered a leap, it's a dash.
I mean, it looks like a leap, though.
It looks like a,
I don't think leaps
it
exist
really
in
makes you
League.
think.
Um, does it kill projectiles? If you're talking about like ability projectiles, no. I don't know if it does for like Heimer turrets. It might block
They are
Heimer
not
turrets.
considered a, no, they're not considered a basic attack.
Okay, so it doesn't block Heimer turrets then.
Correct.
Isn't it called a leap strike? I think that's what the ability is called, but it is the way it functions is the same as a dash.
It is called leap strike. I still had it open and I scrolled up.
Um,
That's a good question.
argue Jax's dodge ability is more powerful since he has a stun. Is the stun also on that ability? Or is the
Yeah.
stun on a different ability?
Nope.
I mean, things can be argued there. What makes this so strong is the fact she can apply it to others. And this isn't even technically the overloaded part of her kit. This is relatively okay. The only problem I foresee with this would be a like number balancing situation. But it's also this on top of, already having however many passives we want to consider the queue.
In total, between 3 to 4.
Yeah. Um Now, if we move on to her next ability. Now, ADCs are normally supposed to be low mobility with high damage that are very squishy.
Yes, there are some exceptions, but not a whole lot.
Nyla, for her E, has a dash that can be used twice. So she is already considered a high mobility champion just because she can use that twice. Um, she dashes in a fixed distance towards the direction of her target, dealing physical damage to the enemy she passes through. So essentially, this is similar to Pike's E, but you
Correct.
can do it twice. And there's no stun. That's the other difference between Pike's and hers. Um, it resets her basic attack timer and her uh, Q and her R can be casted during this dash.
That is true, Sam. Her dash can be used on friendlies.
Because she's not dashing to something. That is the thing. She is not dashing to a champion. She is just dashing.
Mm.
Like I said, it is very much like Pike's E. Pike doesn't have to go to a champion. He can go whatever direction he wants. The only difference is I also think Nyla's is a fixed direction, while Pike's you can kind of like turn. But that's also because of the stun part.
That's also that's how that one functions because it needs a point of origin plus the point of exit.
Yes. Um Again, I don't think this is necessarily overloaded part. The problem I have with this is that she is an ADC with high movement compared to
High movement,
so many other ADCs.
high movement, high sustain. Like she can be in a lane
Yes.
a long ass time before she has to back.
Yes. And
And then just
she's also getting movement speed from her W. I think that's the only other place she gets movement speed as of that we have read this time. I'm not seeing it anywhere else. But still, that
I'm
is
also not seeing movement speed. So
a lot of movement speed for just one champion. That is supposed to be not high movement. Which is another problem I have with a champion that came out not long before Nyla, Zeri, who has way too much movement speed for a ADC. Thankfully, Riot has nerfed her into the ground and made her completely like useless.
yeah.
But they did that. But like they had to do that because otherwise she had too much movement speed to do what she needed, like was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Like I do not think they fully thought Sari out.
They did not. Um. Now, lastly, is her ult, her fourth ability, which she whirls her whip around her for 1 second, dealing physical damage to the enemies for a few for actually less than a second. It's 0.25 of a second. She then unleashes a burst of physical damage and pulls them towards her if they are within that range. Each hit also slows the targets for 10% for 3 seconds. Now that's just the first half of her ult, which is the same that we see in Diana. I don't think Diana slows,
No.
but it is the same concept
Not on its
of
own.
yeah.
Let me
But it is the same concept of pulling a certain radius of people towards herself and dealing damage. Um Now on top of that, with her ult, Nyla heals herself and nearby ally champions for a certain amount based on critical strike chance. The lowest amount for that is 30%, and it goes up to 45%. And it is based on the damage dealt to the champions. She also reduces. Oh wait, no, it's reduced to 10%. I read that wrong. Okay. Um, and then it converts each healing instance into maximum health or beyond maximum health into a shield. 30% is the lowest for her healing, yes.
I'm looking at what Sam said, so give me a second here.
Um,
It does indeed. It has on it that it slows for 2 seconds after the physical pull. So that's copied and pasted directly.
30% of what she does, yes. But it's based on critical strike chance. So critical strike chance can increase that amount. Um, Easily transition between melee and ranged. only on like a 6-second cooldown. She's technically always ranged, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure she's considered ranged because even her whip is too long of a. It's like Thresh range, her basic auto.
Yeah, but you have to remember, for the longest time, Thresh was considered melee.
Yes, but he's considered ranged now. I'm
But
pretty
I
sure.
think she's considered melee. Don't quote me on that. Hang on. That's an easy Google.
And also, that becomes less than a 6-second cooldown if you're talking about her Q making her ranged. Yeah, that becomes pretty much up every single second if you upgrade it.
She is classified as a melee champion.
Or I shouldn't say it comes up every single second, but the second it stops at like being active, because you activate it, it goes on cooldown at the second you activate it, but it's still working. And then once it stops working, you already have it back up again at max level. Her Q gives her brains, but she is melee fair. But her Q on the cooldown that it is makes her pretty much constantly ranged. Um, at least cooldown at max level. I said earlier, her kit feels so powerful is because she can be ranged. I sort of agree to that. I think it's more the amount of healing she has in her kit. So now,
It's the amount of healing plus how much she can actually just dodge around.
yes. But if she didn't have that much healing, the dodging around wouldn't be as big of a thing. She'd be no different than
It,
Katarina at that point.
each individual thing is not bad. When they are put together at these numbers,
Yes. Because
is.
you have her passive healing her, you have her Q healing her, you have her ult healing her.
And that is before
Even having an
items,
items, yes.
runes, that so you're at this point,
Also,
her healing is just
yes.
immense.
Also for the non-league players, runes are things you apply to your champion before you start the game. Runes can do various of things. They can increase your range, they can increase your healing, they can increase how much health you have. They get
Your
applied
movement
throughout the
speed.
game, but they're set things that you pick at the beginning of a game. Um, Runes can also change games a lot. So now, honestly, I came up with like, if we were to make her so she wasn't overloaded, pretty much remove a majority of the healing stuff. So, like for her passive, I said remove the amplified healing and shielding. Remove the healing she gets from nearby allies receiving it, and or buff grievous wounds, which grievous wounds, if for people that don't know, is something you can build through items within League, and I think also some champions have it.
Some champs do have grievous wounds or grievous wounds like
Yeah.
abilities.
Okay. Um, and it pretty much negates healing, or not negates it, but makes it so healing is not as effective.
Minimizes the effect of healing.
Yes. Increasing the cooldown. I mean, that is an option too, but for the role that she is meant to be in and what she is meant to be doing, she should have to build this amount of healing, not just have it. Tell me an ADC that has this amount of healing built in besides her. Tell me an ADC that has healing built in besides her.
Mira, actually. I think she's got lifesteal on one of her abilities.
Who is also a newer champion.
Over, yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I'd consider her overloaded.
Uh, we'll debate that one later.
Yeah. Um,
Because we differ there, but I digress.
the thing is I don't mind the armor pen being there, but if the armor pen is gonna be there, remove the healing. Keep one or the other. One or the other. And also, the armor pen is not actually on her passive. The armor pen is on her Q. So, that is a different ability. Now, what I said for her Q was to keep the active and just completely remove the passive as it belongs on a different champion or as its own ability.
I agree that it should be on a different champion. I think she already like even if you were to erase half of her passive naturally, you have enough passive there for her entire kit. I digress on that though.
They remove that weakness. Well, Samira still technically has that weakness. That Q is not significant enough for it to actually mean something in a game. Um, like it's the only way. Like it pretty much Samira Q allows her to stack her passive. That's not a lot. Samira had weakness. That's covered with the. Oh, you okay? You meant Nyla had Samira's weakness. Okay. Yes, and it is covered with the Q, but that's why I'm saying pretty much cut the Q in half from what it is. I don't think that ranged is necessarily a problem. I think it's the healing, the shielding, the armor penetration that becomes the problem.
I think
And
that it's
also,
the fact that it's all stacking together. Like
yeah,
that it's a little bit ridiculous to be like, ah, yes, we're gonna have this champion be able to do. They automatically have so many items built into their kit. They have a Bork essentially. They
yeah.
have a Lord Doms.
They have a
They
Bork plus a
have
Tiamat.
right. They have a team up. It's this this single champion does not have to build anything that they physically don't want to.
Mm-hmm. They literally build a bloodthirster, and that's good.
You want to have a Gale Force? Fine, do it. You need a shield bow? Whatever.
You
More
want
life steal.
Kraken? You just
Are
take
they
out tanks
kind of
faster.
tanky? Like it's
It's a thing.
when you start stacking passive on top of passive on top of passive, this is what starts to happen is okay, what do they need to do? They don't need to do anything.
Yeah. For her W, I said this was mostly fine, especially since literally you have to stand on top of her to actually get, like, as an ally, you have to stand on top of her to actually get that. And, like, pretty much the second you walk away, it goes away. Because it only lasts for 1.5 seconds if you're not standing on top of her.
Yeah, that one is very much like I
It was
could
a
see
number
that
balancing
as
thing.
being there.
Her W was just, they needed to balance the numbers correctly, and it's good. It's mostly the other stuff tacked onto having that. Like, her entire queue could be separated out until like two, three different things. That's the
Right.
problem.
By the way,
Oh,
for those of you who were not keeping track, she has a total of 7 to 8 passives.
Hmm. And they're not all labeled as passives, but they are passives. Technically, it's a
Within
passive.
some
It's technically a passive to have the allied champions walk over you to, and they get it too. That's a passive. That passively happens when you have the ability active. Yes, you have to activate it, but it's still technically a thing that happens in the background. Because you do not have to activate it for like on them too, if that makes sense. Um her E. So this my main problem with her E was the fact that you could cast the Q mid dash.
so it's less about a ability problem, more like the fact that you could do 2 abilities at once.
Yes, I still don't think she should have the mobility for her role, but if we change her like how she functions a little bit, like if we to remove some of this stuff, she is either not going to be in bot lane or it's not going to mean as much because okay, now she has yes, 2 dashes. However, she would not have the healing to actually want to be in a fight. And those 2 dashes would pretty much be to get in, do a little bit of damage, get out.
See, I struggle with the fact that it's 2 dashes. I think if you were to actually cut that down to 1, that would be fine.
That would
Or at
definitely
least
have to be
make
something that
it
would need to be
be
tested.
right. Or at least make it be a reset. Or, there's make it a conditional thing that she can dash
Yeah,
twice in a row.
kind of like Tristana W. Make it like Tristana
Tr-
W.
Tristana W,
Which
or even Diana's mechanic where you mark them, you get a free cast of your E, and then you can cast it again even if you don't have that mark. You just make that ability go on cooldown.
yeah,
That would
for
be fine.
an insane amount of time.
Yeah, 20. I think
22
Diana's is
seconds.
22. I was about to say it's
I don't
between
think that's
18 and
max.
22 seconds.
I don't think 22 is max level, but that's level
No,
1.
that's the beginning.
And you don't upgrade her E until you've upgraded both her Q and her W. Um,
Which makes sense, to be fair.
yeah. But still, that 22 seconds hurts.
Whenever you have to use it, it's like, oh my god. You
Especially if
you
you
are spending a resource.
I can't tell you how many times I barely missed my Q, thought it hit, used my E, and then didn't have it up. Like I'll be doing Dragon or Herald, and I'll send my Q to start it. And like especially for like Herald, I'll wait for a Herald to crash before dashing in, so it won't push me away. But if I
Mhm.
wait like a millisecond too long, it eats up the E.
Yep.
It's a frustrating thing, but
I
we're not
I'll be
talking about.
honest, I've actually done that a couple times myself where it's like that should have hit and I go in and they flash or they use some kind of movement ability to get away and I'm sitting there spamming
E.
and
Yeah,
it's like why am I not going? Oh, I still have 15 seconds, son of a bitch.
yeah, yeah. It's a thing. But yeah, no, like making it more for also for those that do not know, Tristana W is a actually I think Tristana W is considered a leap
It is because you're not blinking, you're not
dashing.
dashing, you are physically going up and over
Yeah,
because you can clear terrain.
would Zaya R also be considered a leap at that point then?
Yes.
Okay.
Hers is considered because she again, she physically goes into the air. She can go over terrain with it. I don't know if you've seen that, but
Yes,
there
I
are
have.
people who, yeah, uh, who go over Baron Pit with it
I've watched
and
Dan
then
enough.
steal Baron. Yeah, Dan does it too. But
um
that is a leap.
okay, so yeah, it is a leap that will do an aerial effect when landed. Uh Very minimal damage, but it's still an aerial effect. And if you get a kill after using the leap gets reset off cooldown and you can use it again. You can also I think there's also another way to reset it. It's 4 hits, right?
You have to get a max stack on bomb
Okay.
on her E.
Which I'm pretty sure is you place the E and you have to do 4 or 5 hits.
4 hits puts it at its max. The fifth hit is what will give you it
Okay.
because you're forcing it to detonate. You can also jump on it and it will detonate from that, giving you that additional jump after the fact.
Yes. Um so maybe making it something similar to that where you can get resets based on other actions would make it better. However, I like I said, I think the main like if we want to leave it exactly how it is, just get rid of the fact she can use her Q during it. Because realistically, how many abilities can you actually use twice at once that are not passive abilities?
Diana can cast W in the air. There are a
So,
handful of
like,
champions that have that. Like you can use two abilities at the same time that are
it's
active
still
abilities.
very rough because most 9 times out of 10, Diana's not actually hitting someone until she gets to her target.
Correct.
Now, unless she's surrounded by literally the entire enemy team, that's a different story. But and especially with how much her Q actually does, allowing her to do it while dashing around is kind of crazy.
Agreed. Yeah,
Um,
my beef is more with the other abilities that just keep stacking passives
yeah.
in the actual dashes in and of itself.
And now with her R saying that the Q we removed the healing on the Q, I don't mind there being the healing for herself on her ult, especially as a squishy ADC. That makes it actually reasonable to use her ult. Just like Samira has lifesteal on her ult. If she didn't have that lifesteal on her ult, it would be too scary to actually use it.
It'd be way too conditional to use. It wouldn't be an ultimate at that point. It would be a suicide
Yes.
engagement.
And that's how I feel. That's why I'm saying if we remove the healing on the Q, keep it on the R.
Because let's be honest, even if you got rid of that healing from her Q, you still have the items. You still have the runes.
Mm-hmm.
You're still getting good amounts of healing, especially I'm assuming right now is a conqueror build, especially since she is melee. So she stacks that very quickly.
Yes. I also had another idea with her R, which is so she heals herself and nearby allies and then gains shield when there's too much healing. Now, what I said was she gets that healing for herself, and then any excess healing that she gets goes to her allies.
That is also a better way to balance that.
Yeah.
Let her, because ADCs do not build huge health pools ever. Like, I think the most is probably around 2,500. Don't quote me on that, but
Also
like
depends if you are just like choosing to be a tank ADC.
that is fair.
Because you can build like
You
health.
you can. It's just you are less of an ADC at that point.
Yeah. But that's why I'm saying like that's why we kind of need to rework like her main passive because like honestly also just removing the XP that allows her to go mid.
Yeah,
That XP part of her passive allows her to go mid. And choosing to get rid of one of the other parts of her passive would just make it so like just her passive needs to be reworked a little bit, but they're also tacking on parts of it to keep her in bot lane.
yeah.
However, they're also the people that are going, well, we don't want to restrict where champions go. Um, let's
Everyone
blitzcrank
should go
jungle.
everywhere.
Let's make it so
Yes,
any
you me
champion can be
jungle.
jungle. But we're gonna make a passive that makes it so this champion can only go in one spot. Effectively. It is a thing. Honestly, that passive entirely just needs to be rethought out.
Yeah.
And then just remove the healing and stuff from her. Remove the passive from her queue. Everything that is listed in her as a passive is listed as one passive, but it could be easily three. Just remove it.
And again, literally has 8 total passives. Like,
Yes.
come on, man. Older champions have 1, 2, some 3. Oh boy.
Some
You
don't really have
literally
any.
some don't even have a true passive.
And some of the ones that, like, okay, going back to Twisted Fate, he doesn't really have a passive. And then on top of that, his E is a passive. So he
So
only
you're
has three abilities.
sacrificing, yeah, you're sacrificing having an active ability for a passive. To be fair, it is giving him true damage, which is a very, very nice thing to have, but you're reducing his total amount of abilities.
Yes. Vane's kind of in a similar boat with that because her true damage is on her an ability as a passive. And
Correct.
that's the other thing. We see champions that literally have their active abilities replaced for a passive ability. But then we have
And have been
champions,
meta forever.
yes, and then we have champions that are getting same similar passive abilities on actives with other actives. Like, I don't know. That's why we're talking about overloaded kits. Why does this exist? What exists as this and what can be changed?
Why is this way?
Yes.
When you have, and again, good on League for having almost 170 champs at this point. Like,
Props to Riot. That's a lot of thinking.
again, at a bare minimum, you're talking 810 total abilities. That means people have sat there and worked on champions for multiple hours because you can't just make an ability and it be put in. You have to consider runes. You have to consider items, whether items can actually stack on top of your passives or abilities, I should say, so on and so forth. You can't just add, oh, there's a revive mechanic now, even though their revive mechanic is a little bit irks me a little bit, I should say. Word's hard. Uh, but still, they at least thought it out of, okay, if he kills somebody with the mark, all other marks on other champions go away. That's still better than just saying he can revive dead people.
Yeah.
So
Um,
again, props to Riot. Good on you.
yeah. Now, that also, with being said, I mean, I sat down and for probably about an hour thinking about what I would change on Nyla back when I did this, but that does not nearly compare to the amount of time they probably spent when making this champion, going back and forth through all the ideas. Now, from
Yeah,
an outsider's perspective, from a normal consumer's perspective, it probably doesn't seem like they spent time on this champion because there are things that should be changed. But at the same time, there are plenty, like, there is a ton of time spent on these things. And what we're saying is just quick ideas that could potentially be right. But the first idea is not always the best idea.
because it might just make the champion useless. It,
Yes.
sometimes if you take away, like if you took away Pike's passive, uh he kind of stops existing as a champion because Pike's passive is what makes that's Zorn, I believe.
That is a Zoran. Also, it's okay,
Okay,
Jinx. It's completely understandable.
fair. But if you remove Pike's passive, which is whenever he executes somebody, or when you remove his passive on his ultimate, whenever you execute somebody, meaning kill them with that ability, he shares gold with whoever was the last to deal damage to him. He's no longer really a champion that can exist
Yeah.
because Pike's entire point is I'm a support assassin that generates more gold.
Yes. And if you are to remove that passive as a gold, you would no longer put him in the support role. You would buff his E back to doing damage to minions
God, I
and
missed
put
that.
him back in mid. Like you
God,
would
I
you
missed that so much.
removing the your cut, you would change him to then be an assassin for mid lane, which requires a lot more reworking.
Yeah, it's so you can't just say I don't like this. You have to go I don't like this.
What can we
Why
do?
don't I like this? What would be more fair? What would be better? And sometimes it does come down to, hey, we just have to scrap this and start from the beginning.
Yes.
Some things get too muddy. When I've my first class with um in this game design, or my first game design class, I can English sometimes, only sometimes though. I had many ideas for that game, but unfortunately it was like we have 5 weeks
To do it.
to make this game and refine it to some degree.
I
I
had
can't,
sorry.
I physically can't.
Yeah. I had 15 weeks and think about how many ideas probably came up and were not added. Even
Especially
there,
knowing your partner.
yes. um, but even now, like years since I took that class, working with groups on certain games, we have ideas, and honestly, sometimes we just have to look at them and go, let's focus on this other thing. And if we can get to this, we will get to this. But it is an idea that is going to exist.
It's cool. It's in its baby stages. Sometimes it doesn't get past baby stages
Yes.
because there isn't enough time. There isn't enough like interest. There's so many factors that actually go into making games that you have to actually sit and think about. Can I make this ability work? Can I make this idea work within a reasonable amount of time without drastically having to change
Everything.
everything?
And then on top of that, Riot is working with very old coding. They have to be careful of what they add in and how they add it in because things overlap. Things can't, like, they reuse a lot of mechanics. Hence, certain things we say are a leap, certain things are a dash, some things are
Invisible versus
is
stealth
stealth. Yes.
versus camouflage. What? So
Because they're all programmed differently.
they're all programmed just differently enough to be a different entity, to be a different factor. It's like, okay. That's something that still confuses me from time to time that I have to go look up. What is invisible? What is stealth? What is camouflaged? Because those are all vastly different things that have vastly different answers.
And all of them exist.
And all of them exist currently. There are people that use each of those champions that have those within their kits.
I
So
it, I will say I am glad we don't have to be talking about an overloaded kit that involves like all three of them
I would
at this
hate
time. At
life.
this time, I probably just jinxed it, and they're probably going to make the new uh darkened dog have this.
They did not need that help, Luna.
I don't think Riot's watching. They might be. I did put this on my portfolio, and I did apply for internships there.
Hey, right, if you hire her, hire me too. It's actually a package deal. But seriously, it there is a whole hell of a lot that goes into games. And I coming from playing games for decades. Like I've been playing games for 2 decades on various systems and various consoles and not to mention genres. Like I probably have one of the most diverse game pools out there. Is it a video game? Yes. Yes, then. Um, but coming from a background of just being a consumer and now going into being a designer,
It is
it's a
very different.
completely different feeling.
Yeah. It is very different to look at game. No, you will never look at games again the same, even if you did not complete your like. If say you decide, like you get towards the end, you're like, I don't really want to do this. you still will never be able to look at games again the same. You never will be.
Yep. Forever ruined.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not always a bad thing, but it is a thing. Before you started taking game classes, we played uh Back for Blood back in September or whatever. Or it was a September update. I don't know if we played it in September, but it was a September
It was
update.
December because you were busy.
No, but I was playing with you guys is what I'm getting at.
Yep.
Um so it might have been like January or something. I don't know. Uh but we were walking around the I can't even remember what those places are called, but the underground.
Hubs. Oh, the son of a bitch. Tunnels.
Yeah, the tunnels. And I literally stopped, looked at the ground because there was a random light that did not look like it belonged, and was just questioning why did they put that there? Other than to
Why was
actually, like,
this
why, like, I get, okay, they need light, but why is it this specific light? Who made this decision and why? And I stood
this
there for a
really
good few
happened?
minutes, and you guys were like way ahead of me and like asking me where I was, and I was like, this
Called me
light.
over to look at this light and debate this light's existence. And I was like, Luna, it's
It's a light.
a light.
But why was it there? Why was it that design of light? We are underground.
Why is this a different color than every light that has been here previously? Yeah.
Do that constantly. Yeah. Like that is a part of the like the difference between just a general because a general consumer might be like, that's weird, but they'll move on. They won't sit there and be like, why?
Light.
Didn't even go into the game design. That's fair. You don't have to. It's just a different thought process than just most people look at video games. Um,
Because also something that happens a lot that Luna told me about, developers will give out a certain amount of money sometimes in your contract and say, go buy video games, go
yeah.
get ideas, go make ideas, because you never know what might be like, that's cool, but I would have done it this way. And boom, you have a whole different concept for a new game.
Yep. And honestly, that's a lot of game companies. They give it's called I forget what it's called actually. F. Um,
Yeah, you'll need to
but
remind me what that's called when I'm negotiating my contract.
a lot of companies give them because it is so important to just keep getting ideas. Now, obviously, they also want you to actually play those games too, but which becomes more of the difficult part because game design, you will also be working a lot of overtime. And not just game design, but any in the game development field because of crunch time. Crunch time exists, and crunch time sucks. I hate crunch time.
Fair. However, if you're like me and you have this inability to sleep, that means there's 24 hours in a day. Donk!
Also, my attempt of drawing Vel'Koz kind of scares me.
Tentacle noises.
I didn't pull up a reference, and
You're just attempting from memory.
huh.
He so he doesn't actually have an eyelid like the way you have it if you look at a picture. I'm just gonna throw that one out there. I was trying to figure out what you were doing with that. I'm like, maybe that's not gonna stay. it stayed, and it's like, that irritates me. He doesn't have an eyelid. He no exist.
I couldn't remember it. I was just like, I know he's just an eyeball. But
He's an
he has like this
eyeball with
hat thing.
tentacles that come out of the ass of the eyeball. Thunk.
He does have like some type of like, because now I have a picture of
He has a essentially
a hat.
something, yeah, a helmet, a crown, whatever you want to call it. I digress. It was like, but not an eyelid. Anywho, uh, going back to the topic today of overloaded kits,
We're gonna
I
go off topic. It's
yeah, especially since I'm tired and have not slept. Um, I have a tendency to wander. So, oops,
I
but
mean
like
it's
not.
fine. It's a podcast. It's this is what's meant to happen.
Yeah. Um, but Viego was the next one on my list that I would consider an overloaded kit.
Okay.
So, to be honest, Viego is a weird champ to design.
Yes.
He is not like a normal League of Legends champion because technically he becomes every League of Legends champion.
He is. I mean, to make a comparison to another game, Echo from Overwatch. He is
Very much so.
Echo from Overwatch.
So his his passive is a little chunky. It's a little bit chunky. I'm actually going to read this verbatim
Okay.
as best as I can because I also know read no goodly. Um, so whenever Viego scores an enemy champion takedown while alive and within 3 seconds of damaging them, a Wraith Mist spawns. Now let's stop right there. So we kind of start seeing them. I feel like Viego was better designed than a lot of the more recent champs because there are limiters to his ability. There are things that must happen in a order. And if they don't happen in this order,
It doesn't work.
it doesn't work. So spawns a Wraith Mist and that corpse from that corpse for 8 total seconds. That's a little long in my opinion, but you know, I get it.
It has to be
Viego
long
can
enough to recognize
yeah,
and act upon.
recognize, use the abilities that he currently has, ditch the body, and then go to the next. That's essentially what they wanted to do. Viego can basic attack it and consume it, causing him to blink to its location after winding up for a second. During this, he is untargetable. That's something else we haven't really touched before. Is when a champ is untargetable, because untargetable is actually a more rare ability and is different from unstoppable.
Yes.
Except by turrets and unable to act. He then possesses and heals himself for 2% plus 2.5% per 100 bonus AD plus 2% per 100 bonus AP plus 5% per 100% bonus attack speed of the target's maximum health. That is just the first portion of his passive. So let's break that down. He kills somebody, or somebody he damages dies. He he spawns a wraith that he can take over. When he takes it over, or while he's taking it over, he cannot be targeted unless it's a turret, and he will heal himself for a total of 2, 4, 6, 11. So 11% of the target's maximum HP pool. Okay, he doesn't build a whole lot of health to begin with. He's a
But
more of a bruiser.
we don't talk about the items too much because that's not applying here.
Yeah.
Because you could technically build those items on him. So,
Yes. So here is the second portion of this passage. For 10 seconds, Viego assumes the enemy champion's form and gains their basic attacks, basic abilities, items, and base stats based on Viego's level. He also gains a free cast of Heartbreaker, his ultimate, which is innately placed on a 1.5-second cooldown upon taking that form. And he gains a bonus 10% movement speed while facing enemy champions within 2,500 units. Period. That is the second portion. Now, to be fair, this next portion is just a clarification and is not really part of the passive. So I'll go ahead and state this before we go back to that second part. Viego cannot use active items, consumables, nor shop during possessions. He can cast Heartbreaker or attack a Mist Wraith, and it will end the possession immediately. So once he goes into a Wraith, he can either alt to the next Wraith and start possessing that, or he can just go up and basic attack it and start possessing that. This is his primary passive, or passives, I guess, which makes Viego probably one of the most unique champs in my opinion, because his entire being is, I can play your champ better than you, including having a whole additional champ that it's built around.
it's almost I can play every champ better than you. Also, hello Codex, thank you for the lurk.
And to be fair, the only thing he does not get is whoever he steals, whoever's wraith he takes over, he does not gain their passive, or their ultimate, not their passive, their ultimate.
Yeah. So if he essentially steals, now I don't know exactly how this works. So Nidalee and Elise, he can steal essentially, to my understanding, one of their forms, whichever one they died in. I assume
Correct.
he does not become the other form because he can no longer transform into that other form because that would then cancel his possession.
He does not gain that transform ability because that transform ability is tied to their ultimate.
Yes. The only thing I'm not sure of, do they get the default form or does he get the dead form?
I don't know. That doesn't actually come up that often.
Yeah, because you don't
And
see Nidalee
normally
or Elise in games anymore because they're so weak.
they are. Um it really just does not come up often, and I could not tell you. What do I suspect? I think he gets their basic form.
We should try
That
that
makes
later.
sense. We should. That is something we can do. Um, now, if you were to remove any part of those abilities, you're essentially erasing Viego. The only thing you could do is you could technically remove. You put it in art.
Yes, I sent a message so one of us
Hang
would
on,
remember. Um,
hang on. I got this, guys. I got
are
this.
you gonna
Ready?
pin it? He pinned, even though we never look at our pins.
Excuse you. I have once or twice.
Not to remember something.
No,
Um,
not the point. The only thing that you could remove is that portion of healing, and I don't think you should remove that
no, that would
because he is essential. He's a fighter. He's almost a frontline champion.
it would
So
make him too weak, especially like so. Again, I'm gonna compare this to Echo from Overwatch. Echo from Overwatch possesses the body and gets that full health of whatever she
wow,
possesses.
really?
Yes. Now, when she exits that form, she goes back to whatever health she had entered it in. So if she only had 2 HP when she used her ult, she goes back to having 2 HP when she becomes Echo again.
How
However,
long
when
does
she is
the
not Echo, like say she takes over Diva, she has Diva's full health and mech. Then she becomes Baby Diva. And she can remech. Like Diva, she can remech.
what the fuck?
Yes.
How
Um,
long does that ultimate last?
I think it's 8 seconds.
My God.
Uh, yeah, no, I love Echo.
Echo came way after I stopped playing Overwatch. I probably would have super enjoyed her, but I just stopped caring about Overwatch because I played it too much by myself, and then my
Mm,
ex forced me to carry her,
that's fair.
and I just was like, I'm kind of done with
That
Overwatch.
is completely fair.
And then when I did want to play it, I wanted to play it with Luna, and that almost didn't become a thing because I replaced nearly back in platinum, and it's like,
Yep. I
cool.
mean, you can try Overwatch 2 with us, but I know you said you didn't want to, so um,
Not currently. I don't have a want.
that's fair. Uh, but pretty much, if she did not get that health, imagine becoming Diva in her mech and only having 2 HP. Or actually,
Right.
even with the Viego, who only gets 11% of that healing. So Diva with 50 HP.
Right. It's just that's not that doesn't make it strong.
No,
It makes it
playable. It makes it
better.
playable.
Like, yeah. Otherwise you wouldn't want to use Viego for Viego. You would choose Viego. I don't know why you would choose Viego over any other jungler at that point.
Just
Because
because he can like
other
you
junglers.
you think his abilities feel better, I guess? Like that would be the only reason you like his abilities.
Yeah, his other abilities feel better, but other champions um get called out. Kronos,
About the
what?
pinned.
Oh, um yeah, so it removing that healing and considering he's not getting his max HP, he's getting whoever he killed slash damaged 11% of their max. So guess what, if it's a tank who does have like 8k HP, cool, you're still only getting, what is that, 800 total HP.
Yeah. And
And
imagine if you're
most of the
becoming a
time,
squishy.
yeah, you're becoming the enemy APC slash mid
ADC.
laner slash or the enemy ADC or the enemy jungle. Like that's basically who you are looking for. So you're talking below 2500 health. So you're healing for about 250. I know for a fact with Jin, you can get on a basic attack if you are playing it right, 500 HP back. Assuming you don't crit. If you crit, you're talking more like 800 on a basic.
No. Also, I don't know if this was exactly worded in uh or how it was worded in what you read, but
I read it from where you're reading it currently.
no, I know. But he also essentially gains that person's stats. So if that
Yeah,
person is severely behind, he
you
is
are
now
behind.
severely behind.
This has actually happened a couple of times going against a Viego where they would take Luna's body, except unfortunately for Luna, when she was playing ADC, she was behind sometimes. And then I would just turn and burn as Vel'Koz and he would pop. It's like you just it Viego is a literal 5 head champion because you have to know
Who to
who your
possess.
enemy's abilities are and where they are in the game.
You need to know everything. And if they are behind, can you actually successfully make a play from being behind?
Because guess what? Technically, you could just go hit that wraith, pop out of that wraith with your ult, and pop into another wraith. That is a strategy. But if you accidentally go into a worse champion, cool, you got that a little bit extra healing, you also might have just doomed yourself. So that is just his passive. Now, ironically, his next ability, his Q, starts with a passive. So Viego's basic attacks are are empowered to deal bonus physical damage on hit, which has a maximum threshold and is capped at 80 against monsters. That's not that bad. Not not
No.
in my not in my thought process.
There's not a lot to it. It's sweet, it's simple.
It gives you a little more damage.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
It's an
Additionally,
empowered auto.
yeah, here's where it starts going up though, because this passive actually has a whole nother fucking paragraph. What Viego to me was when they started becoming too much.
I'd say it's a little bit earlier than Viego, but
they kind of went ham with him.
yeah. But then they toned it back for Renata.
Right. Helps take a lot of the power out of his kit. Yeah, but Sam, you also have to remember when Viego came out, that was before the durability patch, which means I don't care that you just went untargetable for a second,
You're
because
still
the
gonna die.
second you come out, I'm going to execute you. Anyway, so continuing. Additionally, His damaging abilities apply a mark to enemies for 4 seconds. Vigo's next basic attack against marked targets are empowered and consume the mark on hit to strike a second time, dealing 20% AD plus 15% AP as physical damage and healing him for 135% of the post mitigated damage dealt, increasing to 145 against monsters and reduced by 10 against minions. I'm going to go ahead and read that next stanza as well, because this will end his passive on his Q. Again, this is just a passive on the Q. The second strike, the second strike can critical for 35% plus 7% AD plus 200 plus 26.25% AP, and it turns out and it is applied as physical damage and applies on hit effects. Again, very, very wordy. What this just means is he deals a little bit more damage because it is a empowered auto attack, assuming he used a damaging ability, mainly his Q and his E or his R, because his W does not, or no, his, I think his E, yeah, his E is the one that does not do damage. Anyway, he deals a bit more damage and he heals himself for a pretty decent amount, all things considered. So, Luna, what do you think of that for his passive? Even though it's like 3 paragraphs.
Um, So the only part I like kind of having an issue with is that middle section with the healing. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I think that's fine depending on the amount he gets. Obviously, we have the numbers here, and in game, it doesn't feel too bad to go against.
He doesn't feel invincible by
No.
any stretch of the imagination. Now, now we get to the actual active portion of this ability. He stabs in a straight line.
Yes. That's another thing. It is there is no like, and it's a skill shot, isn't it?
It is a skill shot. You can miss your Q. Like,
Like I
this
said,
is just a normal ass ability.
and without it, I mean, he may be fine without that section, but he might not be.
Yeah.
So, and he is a bruiser. Now, if he was an ADC, get rid of that. Just no.
Get rid of the healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
I
he
could
was
see
an
that.
ADC, get rid of that healing, but that's also because the damage is going to be higher, which means healing is going to be increased for items that heal. But
Yep.
that is a different story. That is a different case scenario. He is a bruiser that is in the jungle, and he kind of needs that healing to jungle in general.
Yeah, his clear in jungle is not the healthiest. He ends up needing to back after that first rotation. If you can stretch and go into a second rotation, but if you are invaded, more than likely you're dead or you have to burn your flash and you pray that they didn't bring help.
Yeah.
But overall, that Q, even though a little wordy, I don't think is necessarily overloaded.
Wait, hold on.
Or maybe it might be overloaded, but I wouldn't consider it overpowered.
Yeah, it's definitely a little on the overloaded side, but it also we have to think about the rest of his kit because if this is the only section, which I don't think it is, that we could call overloaded, again, numbers can make this so it's not as overloaded feeling.
You are correct. This is not the only thing that makes it overloaded. It's him as an entire champion because each of his abilities takes so much explaining because he's not a simple champion.
Yeah.
He's a he's very much a three-dimensional champion, and this is probably one of the first times we see Riot having to go out of their way and be like, "Hey, look, there's a lot to this. Let's try to cover as much as we can."
Yeah.
So his next ability is a stun. Now, he has to charge that up, and the longer he charges, the longer the stun duration is, but it's still not above 2 seconds. In fact, it is between 0.25 and 1.25 seconds in total. So, again, that's not a huge thing, especially since he becomes slowed. He dashes forward, but before that dash, he is slowed while he's charging up. And if you hide behind minions, the first thing that's hit is the only thing that is stunned.
Yes. It is essentially similar to Vi's Q,
Yes,
which is she has it's a wind up of an ability where she must uh, cast in a straight line, and if it hits a champion, it will stun them. But however, while she is winding up, she is slowed.
correct. Now, this deals damage, but it's not a whole hell of a lot of damage. At max rank, it's 300 plus 100% AP. You don't build a hell of a lot of AP on.
I mean, arguably, you could looking at these
You
AP
could.
stats.
In fact, I had a build that has Gnasher's Tooth in it. It's Bork plus Gnasher's Tooth,
Oh,
but I
that
never got to um, really try it out, unfortunately.
and you can always can you always can.
True, I could.
If no one shows up today, I'll play top. You can play Viego and try it.
YOLO. So again, this ability by itself not doesn't make him overloaded. His next ability. Send a specter in the direction that creates a trail of mist in its wake, which lasts for 8 seconds. If it hits terrain, the mist will spread further around either side. So, for instance, if you hit Dragon Pit will become engulfed in a mist. Now, again, this is one of those champions that has a camouflage ability, and it's actually camouflage. If you are near him within a certain amount of units, or if he passes over a ward, specifically control ward, he is visible. So he's not stealth, which is invisible, and he's not invisible. He can still be seen, he can still be targeted. While he is inside his mist, he gains bonus attack speed. If he does not attack or cast ability, he also gains movement speed. However, if he is casting abilities while in mist, he is no longer camouflaged. That is something to keep in mind. So, declaring a basic attack or casting an ability will break and remove the camouflage. So yeah, that's pretty much his.
I don't think that's
Um,
too bad.
no,
It's a
it,
stealth
it
that will
really
break,
is.
and I mean, it's the same as Twitch stealth essentially, but only for a certain area instead of a duration. I mean, it is for also a duration too, but think about Twitch
The
stealth.
only thing is the area of effect can be massive, but at least it's not like his allies also gain the benefit of being camouflaged. That would make it overpowered
Yeah, definitely.
entirely. And we are coming up on his last ability, the Heartbreaker that we said in his passive. So Viego gains a displacement immunity. So essentially, anything that knocks up, suppresses, anything that would be considered like hard CC that would move him. Unlike suppression, which would keep him grounded, would be another one. Anything that stops his actual movement. Uh, over the cast time and then blinks to target location. Upon arrival, he strikes the most wounded enemy champion nearby, dealing physical damage, slowing them by 99% for 0.25 seconds, and applying unhit effects at 100% effectiveness. Other nearby enemies are knocked back up to 400 units away based on proximity, though not through terrain. All targets hit are dealt 120% AD physical damage increased by 0 to 100% based on critical strike chance. Now, this is where things start to compound a lot because, okay, when he dashes in, he gets healing. When he deals damage, the passive from his Q gives him that healing.
Hmm.
If he kills somebody in that, which by the way,
He gets more healing.
he gets more healing. And then he also can deal up to 20% plus 3% per 100 bonus AD of targets missing health. That turns into an execute at some point.
Yeah.
It really does, especially against
I was
squishy targets.
I was gonna say how this is reading almost sounds a little bit like Garen and Darius ult.
Kind of. It kind of is. It's just his is more meant for dashing.
Yeah. Now,
But you're
if
now
removing the
good.
ability to get the healing from the other stuff from like in here would probably make this a little less over like it's everything adding on that makes everything in here overloaded.
Which is kind of the theme of what we're getting at here, where these abilities individual aren't bad most of the time. It's the fact that they compound. And again, this is before items. This is before runes. Those runes that he takes gives him additional healing and damage.
Mm-hmm.
Those items he get make him an incredible duelist because he just hits you and takes a percent of your max health away. Bork is one of his big item spikes. He's actually one of the few champs that just goes Bork first. Why? Because it's such an item spike for him.
Because they just can.
Because they can. Even against somebody like Ramus, who's meant to be able to fight and combat people in their own jungle and kill them in their own jungle because of how godforsakenly tanky that armadillo is. Um, he has trouble against anyone who can build Bork
Mm-hmm.
because he it it deals percent health damage. On top of the fact he's healing every time he hits because that Q is on a
A
really
really
low
low
cooldown.
cooldown. Yeah.
Every 3 seconds. So in a actual fight, here's what's happening. He's going to Q auto attack, auto attack. Then he's going to just do a quick W and auto attack. And then auto attack. His Q is back up. Q, auto attack, and auto. Every time he auto attacks that first time, he's gaining health.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with items like Bork and runes like Conqueror, or even if you don't take Conqueror, if you decide to go Undying Grasp, which is incredibly annoying and underplayed, it's just so massive.
You can be a tank without being a tank.
Now,
It is,
actually, I wouldn't call it a tank. He's a juggernaut,
yeah.
which is basically what Darius actually is. He's not a bruiser. He's just a juggernaut.
Uh, hold on. Yeah, he is classified as a juggernaut. On
Junkernaut.
I,
Hang on, someone clip that. I, we words only the bestly here.
there's also like every time I hear the word juggernaut, I think of like a specific accent, like it's said it like so I've heard someone say it in, and
Uh-huh.
like I have to stop myself from trying to like mimic that accent because I know I cannot pull it off. So,
We're gonna have a discussion off camera because I have to know.
um,
Oh, oh Lord.
I love that he's labeled as a tank on here, Darius.
Yep,
So what is Viego labeled as? I didn't even check that. He's a
he's a
skirmisher.
fighter. Oh,
But
sorry, scrimmager. He's a
skirmisher.
scrimmager.
Why'd you add a D?
Scrimmager? Because that's how I've always said it. You
And
can't.
you make
There's
fun of
no
me for
fixing that.
saying these things.
Do you want to talk about your dyslexia with words when you verbally speak them? I'll call you out on your own stream.
Look,
You can't silence the truth.
I will call myself out for not being able to read because I literally read certain letters from the actual word and fill in the blank. I was trying to read mirror. I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday, but I tried to read the word mirror. It was this morning, and I read the word movie.
Oh, Luna. You're a
So
mess.
yeah, reading hard.
Words hard, reading hard,
This is why I
life hard.
don't read out loud when I do like uh my story based games.
Make us read. I don't want
Yes,
to have to read.
yes.
It's your job. You're the
So
streamer.
I hate the way I just said yes.
Yes. Oh. So again, Viego by himself No, like each individual ability, not overloaded.
but all
But the
together.
fact
And then if you add on what his what makes Viego Viego, it
his
makes everything else
two
a little
paragraphs,
too much.
especially since his ult gets a reset whenever you take over a wraith.
Yes.
So
The thing is,
every
though,
time you get to do that ultimate, if you're at max level, you're doing at the bare minimum 20% of the target's missing health. And
mhm,
the fastest you can rattle that off is about every 3.5 seconds because you kill the target, you take over their form, you're then put on about a second to 1.25 second cooldown before you can actually use that ultimate again to jump out,
mhm,
and then you do it again. So
yeah,
within the span of 4 total seconds, you just did 40% of the target's missing health.
yes.
Yep.
Um,
Back again.
and um, all right, just lost my train of thought. But the other thing is, like, you can take all of his abilities, all of his other abilities, and still have a champion like removing his passive. But it's his passive that makes him unique.
Right. His passive is what makes Viego and not another nameless blob champion.
Yeah.
So honestly, the best way to balance him might be just messing with the cooldown timers a little bit, maybe reducing some of the healing he can
But
overall put out.
the thing
But
is he's
again,
not overpowered. You can
he's
still
not
very
overpowered.
easily kill him. Even when he's not possessing a weak body, he can still easily be killed.
Yes.
It's how do we not overload him anymore? Which would just be pretty much some of his abilities need to become that passive instead.
Yeah. It it's a little bit hard when you look at Viego because he's actually fairly well balanced out.
Yes. He has an overloaded kit.
He
He's
just
balanced with an overloaded
innately
kit.
is yeah, he just innately is overloaded. All right, who's the next champion on your docket?
Well, actually, I'm gonna probably call this session here because it's lunchtime.
Fair.
Um,
Who needs food? We have League. We live on League.
but
League only
this
League.
is definitely also a topic to be continued elsewhere because there are, as you said, nearly 170 champions in this game, and we only covered 3 of them with overloaded kits. There are champions with underloaded kits that I would like to cover eventually too. Um,
And then we
essentially,
can also take in account overpowered, which is
overpowered,
just a
yes.
whole nother
Another,
section. Who's
yes,
underpowered? A whole League of Legends is one of those games that kind of just transcends time because it's been around for so godforsakenly long,
yes,
and it's not looking like it's gonna go away anytime soon.
yes.
And I really love the game. League of Legends is probably one of my favorite games.
I really like the game too. Like, yes, the community is the only part that I'd say makes it a not good game, and the devs can't
Community
do
is a
much about that.
little bit toxic.
There's not much you can. do about that? That's the thing. Is like
No.
there's only so much you can do to stop a community from being the way they are, and even still, like that, trying to stop them may just end the game. um,
Honestly, I would love to see them go through with what they said they were going to do last year and remove the chat system for a little bit and see how that goes with the new ping system.
I mean, they
Just
can
saying.
try, but like I still feel you can turn off the chat.
Yeah, because there is a ping system.
Yes, and
You have a way to communicate that gives you the same information just as quick.
actually faster.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, there is so much more that can be covered with League because of multiple reasons. And I just know we will not ever get to one in one episode. It may be some time before
No.
we return to League, because there are plenty of other games to look at. There's plenty other topics to look at, not just overloaded kits, but there are so many things we can cover.
Items,
And I don't just not just
runes,
items and
like it's
runes, but
endless.
um, just even on the design side, not even like while the game is in like an earlier development in other games, um, we could literally cover the story of League if we really wanted to.
I'd love to one day.
Um,
When I
now,
mean one day, I mean over the course of a bloody year, because that's about what it would take.
yeah, and the same can easily be said for multiple other games. Overwatch. Overwatch has not been around for as long as League, but has pretty much just about the same stuff to cover. Maybe not as many characters to cover it with, but the amount of stuff to cover.
Not nearly as many abilities
No,
either, but that doesn't mean anything.
it's
The
still a
the
lot.
only reason we have so many abilities
It's because we have so
is
many
because of
champions.
how old League is, how many champions they put out, and the fact of the matter is, we keep saying 810. There's actually significantly more when you start factoring in
Champions that have
stuff like
more, and Viego. Just look at Viego.
Viego,
Viego is literally
Karma,
all champions in one.
empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
transformation. There's so much,
There is.
but League is like a huge game that I could talk about for hours at a time.
Yes, I know. Um,
'Cause I'm a nerd. Hire
but
me, Riot, damn it.
yeah, so this may not be we may not cover League again next month, but we will eventually come back to this or at least another topic similar. There is so much to cover here. There's so much to cover everywhere. Um, and my like even doing this once a month, that's like we're not even gonna cover nearly half of what we could, like of what exists in a year.
No. Even if we were to sit here for like a 6-hour podcast once a month just doing League,
We
that
wouldn't,
doesn't
yeah, just doing any game.
outlast.
Oh my
Like if we were
god.
to sit and do Outlast and still, let's say a 5 to 6 hour time frame, if we were to talk about all of the actual files that got released from the CIA, that's you're talking hundreds
Yeah.
of hours of conversations that we could have,
Yeah.
which is why you made this. So much to talk about.
There is. And it's you don't actually see a lot of people talking about it.
Nope.
And I mean now we're pretty much given that chance. So
Yeah.
um but yeah, no, that pretty much concludes it for this session at least. Um I stream these once a month at the end of the month. The last Saturday of the month is what the plan is, what the goal is. Um December it might be a little difficult. as that is New Year's Day this year. So we'll see how that goes when we get there. But
The likelihood of me being remotely sober is not the highest.
that one might be moved to earlier in that month. We'll see. We will see. But this is streamed to my Twitch every month at that last Saturday, and it is uploaded to YouTube afterwards. So if you do not get to see the full podcast, or you want to watch it again, or do not have time to watch the live version, you can always watch it over there. But this is mostly a goal to share this information, share our thoughts, share our opinions, try and be as accurate as possible possible to what we can for information, and see where it takes us. See what other ideas can spawn out of the depths of looking at other games and analyzing them. But thank you everyone that comes by and supports these episodes. I do really appreciate it. And for now, have a good day.